high-profile Sonoma County guru of music will now play for you. Hi.
Hi, Allowing Matthew, thank you so much, and welcome to Sonoma Sounds.
Thank you.
So let's start from the beginning. Where were you born?
They tell me Cincinnati, Ohio, 1937, about just a week or so of more than 84 years ago. It
Well,
feels like a century in 84 years.
yeah.
I've been around the block. I've had an illustrious youth and a much more Sonoma County contented elderly passage. But I'm in the process of writing a memoir, uh, really about my life, but it's also about the transmission of wisdom and how does that work. It's my fifth book, and my last, I hope. I don't like writing as much as I like doing what I just did, which is playing the piano.
Yeah.
And but I seem to have the knack of it, and alas, but 5 books is enough, and they're all doing well out there, and this one's getting published. So I'm remembering everything about my life. So it's a timely interview because I've got it all swimming around in my head. Moved to Sonoma County when I was what 43 years ago. After 10 years in Marin, a year in San Francisco, and 13 years in Chicago, and 17 years in Cincinnati. So that I went backwards from your question.
That works. Speaking of books, I just read the listening book that you wrote. And there's a story in there about when you were 9 years old and your mom takes you to see Bela Bartok's.
Yeah, four string quartet.
Yeah,
Tough thing to put in a kid in. Yeah.
yeah. So that made me think of a few questions. Your mom wanted to expose you to it because of her Hungarian heritage.
And mine, yeah.
Yeah.
And that was, I'd much rather she had taken me to see a Hungarian state choir or something like that,
Hmm.
where they're singing really listenable tonal music of the Bart. That's a very heavy Bartok piece. I loved the Schubert or whatever it was that was played during that program, but when it got to the Bartok, um, my ears actually hurt. And I can see that because there's all that stuff that's going on in that quartet, and it's heavy. And this is a man who's living through the Holocaust and or pre-Holocaust. And those are unimaginably difficult times, especially for a sheltered 9-year-old kid.
Hmm.
And let's see, what was it? So it was 1946. A tough time to,
Hmm.
So my ears hurt. I started to cry.
Yeah.
And now, Bartok is a person that's close to my heart. I study him. It's one of my favorite beings on Earth or beyond it. And um, he's taught me a lot, not personally, but through his music.
Hmm.
And, it's just I forget why it's in that book, just right there, but it's, like your tastes change and your
Hmm.
sensibilities change, your capacity. This is true all through in all dimensions of life, but it's especially true in music. I mean, you play that to a kid, it says yuck, but you play that to a grown up, it says that's pretty.
So you definitely view Bartok a little differently now than you were 9 years old, I
Yeah, a little
suppose.
bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he was taller then. But yeah, I mean, I couldn't understand. I actually couldn't understand anything.
Yeah.
But 9 and 7, 9 and 6, 6 years later, I was listening to Bob Grettinger, who was a very spiky atonal American composer who wrote really complex music for the band leader Stan Kenton, and uh, I was loving it because it was chaotic and I was full of testosterone. Not what a 9-year-old boy is. Not exactly. So, but a 15-year-old is, and I was just full of this raucous energy. I didn't know what to do with. So everything changes. Nothing. There's no place to stand, as the Buddhists say. Everything's changing all the time. You know. So,
And do you, what would you say is your first musical memory?
um, we had an old upright. It was out of tune, the last quarter tone flat, and my sister took piano lessons.
Hmm.
Well, it's impossible to say exactly what because my parents listened to music a lot. We had, 78 records going
Hmm.
on our Magnavox. But I do remember my sister practicing. And since it was live, the first live music I'd heard in the house, um, I went to the piano and I played by ear what she was playing and having a hard time learning. And I played it by ear. And then she's 4 years older, and I just had such a delight in one upping her because I was a bratty little brother. And so she was working on or something, and
Uh-huh.
I'd go to the piano and I'd figure it out.
Yeah.
But I think even before that, I just went and I just lean in, and that's I was fascinated by sound. I don't know. I'm just wired that way. So I just and quite young, I began to hear harmony. Harmonic progression. I remember the first song that really got me. Let's see, how's it go? Now I forget it. That's a beautiful chord progression. And I heard it when I was about 11 or 12. or long younger, 10 or 9, and I really heard the harmony. I love this.
Hmm. That's real sweet.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
and I just heard it. Like it went boom, and then 3 years later, I heard the Stan Kenton band, which is a hugely popular. There was two big popular bands, Stan Kenton and Duke Ellington. Duke Ellington was the black band, and Stan Kenton was the white band. And they really were black and white. They were segregated, and Duke's band was devoted to black culture and its history and the joy and suffering of its people. And Stan Kenton was trying to be a great American composer, and had a great jazz band. He had monstrously beautiful jazz musicians, all white. Alas, he couldn't integrate the band because he traveled in the South, and they wouldn't let integrated bands in the South. So, I mean, that's Duke's problem too. He couldn't integrate the band if he wanted to play in Alabama.
Right.
So, um, so I Stan Kenton had this unusual orchestration of five trumpets, five trombones, and five saxophones. Well, the five saxophones were standard dance band orchestration, but five trumpets was one or two more than usual, and five trombones unheard of, two or three maybe, and those trombones would make these. And I just went crazy. I heard that so deeply. It was like there were rooms in my house, in my soul,
Mm.
and each chord was some like different play. Oh, and it was so sexualized because I was, and as a kid, as a pubescent kid, and boy, did I hear harmony then. And I remember just running back and forth between this on 78 records, right? Dropping the needle, picking it up. I just get that one chord. Oh, what's that? Pick up the needle, run to the piano, and go. Oh, no, that's not it.
Yeah.
And try to pick the notes out. And my dad took me to a concert when I was 14 and made me introduce myself to the band leader. Stan Kenton was wildly popular at the time. And I just pointed out, I want to write for your band. And he said, sure, you can write for my band. And so all through my teens, I was writing some music for him. And when he came to town, he'd play a few bars and,
Yeah.
I heard it. And then he'd lend me arrangements. I really studied that stuff. At the same time, I'd already had classical training since I was 6. And I played a lot of Mozart and Brahms and Chopin
Hmm.
and not much Bach, alas. I wish my teacher would give me more Bach. And so I had a bunch of training, and then my dad got me the black teacher from Cincinnati, from the ghetto. Was a very segregated city
Hmm.
at that time, and alas, but today too. There are big problems down there, and um, this guy was the leader of the band in the black community, and he
Hmm.
taught me how to write. He taught me how to orchestrate, and I introduced him to Stan Kenton and the band. And by the time I was out of college, which is 8 years later, uh, I got the job. I was a writer for Stan Kenton. I was young. I was
Yeah.
21. You know, and I traveled with the band for a year. They made a record of my music, which ain't bad considering I didn't know much. I mean, I knew something, but I just, I was, I'd never really understood how things worked. I was just had my loves, and you follow your loves.
Hmm.
And but I'd had a good college education by that time, and I'd had it with the Kenton band because the guys all drank beer, were alcoholics, and read Playboy. And I was in the back of the bus reading Aldous Huxley, and I didn't like the life,
Yeah.
you know. But I got what I wanted, and they were monster players. They were really good musicians,
Hmm.
and I was the worst musician on the band. I was a trumpet player, but I was honored as a writer because I was a good arranger.
Hmm.
And so that was my year with Stan Kenton, very young. That was after 4 years of University of Chicago, and which was another story. It was very, very useful to me. It taught me how to think.
Hmm.
Didn't teach me how to pray, but it taught me how to think. And Kenton Band taught me how not to be a professional jazz musician. And I had some theater training, and I liked the theater. And when I got back to founders of the Second City approached me and said, "You want to be our musical director?" I said, "Well, sure." And I didn't have a job, and I didn't want to go back to. I was going to get an MA in English. I'm glad I didn't. And I'm illiterate. I have only a BA and all kinds of academic pretenses, but too bad. And so uh, I was one of the founding members of the Second City, which became Second City TV, and then became Saturday Night Live, and was
Right.
Gilda Radner and all those people.
Mhm.
And I'm just now writing about that. And most of us are dead from those days. I was a pup. I was the
Mhm.
youngest one in the company. Barbara Harris was the ingenue. She was older than me, and so it was just a fabulous time. And I kept that gig, and I studied with a true academic who became a close friend, Easley Blackwood, for years. 5 years, I became an apprentice, and he was a maven of European music. He really, really understood how things worked. He taught me. That's heavy duty. That's industrial strength European stuff, and he made me learn it polyphonically and harmonically, and as a composer. And I was very fortunate because he was the minion of Nadia Boulanger, who taught everybody in the classical field, including Leonard Bernstein and Walter Piston, and a lot of people were her students. And she was the grand mom of of European and American composers, and he was her favorite for a while. And then I got that directly. I was very, very lucky. It was like I learned the European canon that way. I was
Mhm.
practicing Beethoven's, Bach, Mozart, Bartok, everybody 6 hours a day. I mean, that's all I did, and I had this cushy gig at the Second City where I didn't have to work that hard, and everybody was stoned anyway all the time. So, well, we did work hard in the theater. I mean, it was a tough haul, but for me, it was just as part of that machine. The actors had to do all the heavy lifting. I just had to write songs and be the musician. That was not that difficult. And after a while, that dimmed for me, and I wanted to move out west. I came to California. I got a job at the San Francisco Conservatory because I knew that all this stuff, not only as a jazz musician, as an improviser, I left out that part from the narrative, but
Mhm.
I was really into Cecil Taylor and Ornette Coleman, and
Mhm.
of course jazz improvisers, some of whom are just extraordinary musicians. Miles, Charlie Parker, and and I knew all this stuff about improvising, and I knew the European canon really well. So I got a job at the conservatory, and I taught there for a while. I was very wild in those days. Wonderful. John Adams was on the faculty. It was just a wonderful time, and had an improvising group called the Ghost Opera Company. And hung out with the Grateful Dead. Started a choir called the Sufi Choir. It was very popular in both coasts. And uh, in 1974, I got a gig at Mills College to teach their
Mhm.
theory. I was the theory department and composition. And Terry Riley was on the faculty, and my guru, Pandit Pranath, was on the faculty. It was quite stellar. And then they didn't want me anymore. So in 1980, I just set up here in Sonoma County as a private teacher, and the Occidental Community Choir had just started, and I had just been on my own choir stint, and they would pay me $100 a week. Hell, that was good.
Yeah.
It came out of their pockets, and I was developed that choir for 8 years and taught them to be responsible for their own music, their own library. And that's been going on, I think is it 30 years or 40 years? 1980, 40 years they've been
40, yeah,
doing that.
41 this year. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a little geriatric at the moment, but that they've really survived. They almost many times suffocated under their own red tape, but
Mhm.
fortunately they've always had some kind of musical guidance, which has kept them going. Doug Bose, famously, he was my successor. Uh, Controversial figure, but dear in my heart. And then they had other people, Sarah, um, you know her name. I'm blanking on her name. Sorry, it's a function of age. But they've had some good leaders.
Okay.
They find good leaders,
Mhm.
and so that was a feather in my cap. I really loved that. We had a very good time. Everybody's kind of young at the time, and it's pretty wild and very. That's so I got to know people in the county, and by that time I had enough reputation. I could have a private practice, and that's what I've been doing since 1980 is teaching
Mhm.
privately. And God always sends me the right number of students and the right students too. I'll teach amateurs. I'll teach
Mhm.
beginners, but now I have a pretty professional clientele because I've written this book which is all over the world called Harmonic Experience, which is
Mhm.
really is the Bible of harmony, and people are getting to know that. So I just taught a guy in Beirut. Oh, I just said that. Maybe not on the air.
Not on the
And
air. Yeah.
yeah, and I have some pretty good musicians as students, and that's gratifying because I learn as much from them as they do from me, hopefully, or I would get bored. But I have some beginners too.
Mhm.
It's nice. I like the mix. So that's I don't have to do that much, 3 hours a day, and that's my living. My wife is Davy Mathieu. She teaches Hildegard von Bingen as a spiritual practice, as a meditative practice, and she's a science writer for Berkeley Physics Department.
Wow.
So we uh, we work hard. We do our work. That brings us right up to date. We are.
Well, how about another improvisation, and then I have some questions about when you came out to California. And
Okay. Make myself cry.
That was beautiful. Um,
I knew a guy named Seymour Borstein, was probably well known in the county. He's married to Sylvia Borstein. He died recently. We became very close friends. And when he was dying, I would call him up and play for him.
mhm,
He was a psychoanalyst and very not sparing with his advice.
mhm,
And I didn't want to play music that was too melancholy for him. I tried to play. He knew a lot of klezmer music
mhm,
and loved it. And so one time I found myself playing something a little sad like this,
mhm.
and I said, I hope that wasn't too melancholy. He said, I'd work on the melancholy if I were you, which was wise. I mean, he just
Yeah,
told me to go into it.
yeah.
So I was taking Seymour's advice right there.
Well, thank you, Seymour. Um,
Yeah, indeed. he's
um,
he's blushing past the grave.
so, correct me if I'm wrong, but you came to San Francisco in 1967.
Yeah, just in time for the Summer of Love in
Yeah.
January, and we live near Haight Street, Haight Ashbury. So, and it was not long before I was hanging with the rock and roll people. I knew Janice, and
Okay.
I got this gig at the conservatory. It was kind of like Hello Central. It's nothing like it is today. Today they're downtown and they're an upscale school. It might as well be an Eastern school. And but in those days, there's marijuana in the halls,
Hmm.
and faculty and students alike. It was very loose and very diverse and terrific. I mean, it was great because
Hmm.
there's so many different voices which were being expressed there, and the administration was very hip. They pretty much left us all alone, and it was a very competent faculty, and so we had really good piano teachers and opera teachers, so we had that part of it down. But I was teaching improvisation, and everybody was it was hippie time, and it's very fine. So, and then I had three kids coming in, and no, I guess Lucy was born. I had two kids coming in, and then one was born in San Francisco, and my wife and I my wife at the time, and I agreed we shouldn't live in San Francisco anymore. We should move to Marin, and so we found a house in San Anselmo, a really nice house for $30,000, $29,500, which I sold 10 years later for 150,000 or something
Yeah.
like that, and it's now worth 1.6 or something. I
Yeah.
don't
At
know.
least.
and we lived there for 10 years. And
Hmm.
the kids went to Sir Francis Drake, but then we'd
I
had
went
it.
there too.
Oh, you did.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean when I
Yeah.
say we'd had it with Marin County.
Yeah.
It was fine. I mean, it was good to me. I was close to San Francisco. I was making my money, and I got a lot of students, and the kids were going to a good school. Everything was fine and dandy, but it was Marin County, and then we decided to move out here in the country where we could really have land. We have 6 acres. We live Barnett Valley Road, just west of Sebastopol. So we're West County people, and it's heaven here. It's just Eden, and it's green and it's beautiful. We get the marine weather, and alas, we don't have any water like everybody else.
Yeah.
You know, it's tough what's going on. We're far from the fires, but nobody's far from the fires.
Hmm.
It's very difficult right now, but here we are. Now we're
Yeah.
happy to be here, and it's my my wife Davy is a bird aficionado, and we just sit in the garden. She has a huge, beautiful, bountiful garden. We eat out of it all year, and we just watch the birds, which she then names and gives their habitat. And we drink white wine. I mean, what could be more West County than that?
Um, So you mentioned you knew Janis Joplin. I was wondering how much overlap there was between, say, you and Terry Riley and the more academic music scene and what was going on in San Francisco at the time with psychedelic rock and roll and all that. Did those worlds overlap very much?
Not when you look back, but at the time, first place, I'm a very eclectic person, so you
Uh-huh.
can see I've had a lot of training. I didn't
Yeah.
know Janis that well. I knew Jerry Garcia and Phil
Hmm.
Lesh. I
Hmm.
knew the Dead, and the manager of my choir, who's a beautiful singer, uh, was also a close friend of Jerry's and supplier for the band. So we kind of had an in, and but I was so green and snobby about rock and roll. I had to get really stoned one night and go to a Grateful Dead jam, which went on for about an hour, just
Hmm.
free music,
Yeah.
and I went crazy with delight. I mean, I thought this is it, this is it, and so at that time everybody was into synthesis, into their communal ideals,
Hmm.
and that's what was really going on. And we see that culture, as every revolutionary culture, it doesn't survive in its idealistic way as you go through the generations. And there was a lot of failure in hippie culture. But at that time, it felt, uh, even Lou Gottlieb and the deeding his land to God, or whoever that
Oh
was,
yeah. Uh-huh.
Wheeler, what the Wheeler Ranch, that was another thing. I was a friend of Lou Gottlieb's, the Limelighters dude, who had studied with Schoenberg.
Mm.
For you classical people listening to this, Schoenberg's mantra, you must exhaust the possibilities, about 12 tone rows.
Yeah.
So uh, I just knew all these people. And for me, as a 30-year old, 35, 40-year old, maturing into my own musical voice, that's still 40 years ago plus, um, all these influences were just alive. They were red hot. They were real.
Hmm.
So the Dead was real in me, and actually I kind of lost part of my hearing thanks to Janice. Well, thanks to me, but I was at Winterland once, and I just got right up close to one of those speakers
Yeah.
because I wanted to really hear her. She was so phenomenal, you know, and. I wasn't thinking, how am I going to use this? How am I going to use this? Who am I in relation to this? I was just open and listening. As far as the scene is concerned, Terry was a close friend at the time and still is. And he's not really classical music. He's sort of on the edge of
Hmm.
classical music. But now classical music is on the edge, so we don't know what it is.
Yeah.
And so we were very close. We spent a lot of time together because there was that same kind of eclecticism that everything is good, and you
Hmm.
put it together and you just listen to it, and it's taken. I mean, I didn't. My musical voice didn't really gel. My composing voice didn't really gel. I'm as a jazz musician. I wrote for my choirs. That was nice, but my like serious music, concert music voice
Hmm.
didn't gel. And this, what you've just heard, didn't really come together until I was 50.
Wow.
Uh, and then I began to write song cycles for
Hmm.
Davy and concert music, and so it took that long. I was well past the summer of love by that time.
Hmm.
This was 1987. I'd already been here for a while, and when did I move here? Uh, 67 instead of 77. Oh, 78. I moved here, and that's a long time here.
Hmm.
And so after 10 years in the county, I had had enough influences and lived long enough so that I began to understand who I was musically. It took all that circulating around the globe, and that was the time of the click of the mouse,
Hmm.
where you can go to YouTube and hear anything.
Hmm.
That was a big deal. Well,
Yeah.
recordings were a big deal in 1920, and CDs and cassettes were a big deal when they came out in the 70s. that was a big deal, and because you could just hear anything.
Right.
I was really listening to Ravi Shankar when I was in Chicago, and I never heard of Ravi Shankar.
Yeah, I
Um,
wanted to ask you about Shankar because 67 was also the Monterey Pop Festival, and is the first time that Shankar, I believe, played in the
right,
US, the
right.
first time that many Americans heard him. So,
Well, I heard him. I
listened
heard
to him
him in
before.
Chicago before that because I heard recordings of him,
Hmm.
and there's the Beatles thing going on, and I just, I mean, that was I kind of like dropped my whole life and thought, there's something in music I've just never heard before. And this is, and then when I got to San Francisco and especially up north, Marin, and met Terry and the Sufis and Pandit Pranath, who was teaching us all. And he was a real sacred master of North Indian music, one of the best alive at the time, very deep, very old and not pop tradition of
Hmm.
Indian North Indian classical music, and like it was a whole new world for me because you stopped listening to how clever people were, and how talented and gifted and what great composers and great monster musicians were. You start to listen to sound. You know, you spend a whole I really can't sing now, but back in the day, you spent a long time just singing long tones. And back in Chicago, my European teacher, I once asked him, he was actually an acoustician. I asked him about a certain interval. He said, "Oh, that's for people out in California that like to sit around singing long tones." Yeah, sit around singing long tones, indeed.
Yeah.
And so I really entered deeply into sound, and that was kind of my why I could write the listening book because it had transformed from a ambitious musical career to an in-depth inquiry, involvement, engagement,
Hmm.
deep identity with the nature of sound. So that happened to me in my late 40s, and well, it's in my 40s, you could say. But we're lucky, we privileged white people. We get a long time to mature. Mm. So we don't have to go to work and slave labor when I was 14. So I've had a long time to mature and lived a very privileged life for which I'm extremely grateful. It's hard to wake up from it, if you know what I mean,
Yeah.
Dan.
Yeah.
Don't you
Well, how
dare
about?
edit, don't you dare edit that out.
I won't. I won't.
I'm gonna play a jazz piece. I stopped playing jazz for a long time. I gigged for a long time as a
Uh-huh.
jazz musician. Then I stopped doing it. I got interested in other stuff, but I've been revisiting it lately, and just I'm not very good, but I just love playing it, and I just love the changes and I love the good tunes. I'm practicing a piece I wrote, but I'm not gonna play it. I don't play it well enough. So, but I'll play a Dave Brubeck tune. I don't like him, or I don't like his music. But this one tune he wrote was very nice. It's called "In Your Own Sweet Way." So here it
Uh-huh.
is. I'm not going to dwell on this, but I just love playing it. I'm a little rusty.
Sounded good.
I like I like playing it.
Yeah.
Well, anybody who knows the style just knows how I messed it up, but that's all right. I don't care. I have no shame at this age.
So, at this age, what is your creative process like?
Well, I don't mean to boast. It's just better than ever. I just I, I have to say when I'm composing, I'm really happy. I'm just happy, and the agony. I mean, I spent so many decades agonizing about like what's the next note, how do the phrases balance. That doesn't happen anymore. It comes streaming through. It's not fast, and I have to erase a lot and change a lot. But I know what this. The same thing is true as editing with the writing. You just get better at it, and you know when it's right, and you know when it's wrong. I have to say, writing words is agonizing. Words are agonizing. I don't like words. I like stuff that sounds like this. I don't like stuff that sounds like this. Blah blah blah. Well, blah 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 is okay, but I don't like stuff that sounds like this. And but it's what we have. Language is what we have, and so you get into it and you learn how to navigate inside of it. So you're not dealing with words. You're dealing with sensibilities that come out as words. That's hard to do, and I'm a novice. I'm just a beginner. Really, professional writers write. I play the piano. Damn it.
So,
And compose music. So and teach. This is what I like doing, and so I, at this point it's very hard to answer the question because my creative process is that I'm done with my desk, I'm done with my email, I'm done with my tasks, and I get to be by myself and make music. That's my creative process. Is I shed everything else. No more emails today. You, boom, and I'm that's my creative process, turning off the computer and sitting at the keyboard and just going where it goes. And I mean, I've been doing it for so long. I've been composing since I was 12, so that's a lot of years.
yeah.
And I just know how to do it. It's like speaking. It's better than speaking for me. You know, it's just like what I do. So it's very difficult to answer the question. If you'd asked me like 60 years ago, I would have gone into a whole Megillah about what critical analysis. But sorry, it's like sitting. I mean, you just heard it. That's my
Yeah.
creative process. And you know, it's not like anything. This is the limit of language. Blah 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 blah. I can't say it's like anything. It's what it is. So if you say what's music like to me? It's not like anything. It's this. That's what it is. And I just can't get past that at this point because you're just into the isness of it. There's a great cartoon in a book called We Have No Idea, recommended book. It dwells on what we don't. It's a science, general reader, lay reader science book about what we don't know. And there's a cartoon in there, and a physicist is writing an equation on the board. It says A equals B, and suddenly a space person with a big head uh, rears up behind her and points to the board and says, "Why do you need the B?"
It's a good question.
I know the things are what they are.
Yeah, just let it be a.
Let it be A, yeah. But
Yeah.
then again, you know, we have very insistently inquiring minds, and we want to know what's happening. And I have written the Bible of music theory, so
Right.
you know I know how that stuff goes. But my creative process is that I forget everything. I just go into the music, and at this point, it's a living being for me. You know, and when you talk to musicians, they all say the same thing, different words. You know, they get into it and they just get in the zone.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you
For writing, if you ask me about writing, I'd say it's agonizing, and I lean on my wife, who's a professional editor and writer. She's, help me. But that's just because I haven't done it enough. I'm not really devoted as a writer. I'm a yearling, but not as a musician. I'm a master musician and I own it. You know, I've earned it. As a writer, I'm an agonizing writer. If I were a professional writer, I'd be either alcoholic or blocked or dead. I don't know how they do it. I don't know how
Well,
writers do it,
for
but
what it's worth,
they do.
I I enjoyed the listening book. I thought it was actually quite poetic. I thought you had a knack for it. But I was wondering though if the music, if you hear it and have to like run to the piano to play it, or is it something that comes to you when you're at the instrument?
Yes and yes.
Yes, yes.
Both things are true. Sometimes I'm in bed and I can. An interesting thing has happened. I was never good at hearing music. Really pitch by pitch in my life. It's just a failing I have. I'm a creative being, but I just didn't have that. And now I'm having big, serious hearing issues and health issues, and I'm old. Things condense, and well, and they expand and condense at the same time. I'm condensing physically in the sense that I have to pay attention to everything I do, but I can lie in bed and hear symphonies I know and construct pieces and be pretty clear about the pitches.
Hmm.
I've never been able to do that, and a lot of composers can do that. That's just a knack that good musicians have. Conductors, not all, some. Some people have it, some people don't. I
Hmm.
never did, but I have it now. So that's the answer to that question. I can think
Yeah.
up something and then go check it out at the piano,
Hmm.
and it never used to be right. Now it's, yeah, that's what I heard. And if it's worth anything, I'll write it down. And but when I'm sitting here and playing for you guys, this just comes through. Not thinking, just being present.
Hmm.
But I've only had 75 years of intensive study.
Just imagine another 75.
Oh man, I don't know. We're in this prison.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about that, but I listen. Living and dying is a big joke, but after a while, it's a pretty good joke.
Well, I want to ask you also about the Occidental Community Choir and how you got involved and your role in that.
Well, um, I don't know who thought of me. I was a little bit known in the county at that time, and I'd only been here a couple of years. And I was approached by a member of the choir uh, who called me and said that we need a conductor because the first conductor, Philip, I forget his last name, um, conducted for a year and he moved away, and they were conductorless. It was basically a bonfire choir, you know. But it's West County hippies, and they all were literate and they were folkies at the same time. They had a very eclectic. Everybody had an eclectic aesthetic, and they called us they called us the intellectual mafia. The original population who lived there really resented us in our ways, because
Hmm.
we were the educated whites who swarmed over their original land claims, and I don't blame them. And so I had led this choir that had as its central core Sufi teaching and
Hmm.
a Sufi teacher, Sam Lewis, who was a very powerful teacher. attracted a lot of people around him, and was very encouraging to me and my musical direction of sort of spiritualizing American music and bringing mantra and uh, various praising sounds into the general stream. And and I did that with a lot of help from my Sufi choir friends, who are pretty good musicians. A lot of them pretty developed folkies, and they had a good sense of what a good song is. And so I kind of knew that territory, and the Sufi choir was well known because we'd made a bunch of records.
Hmm.
And so I was approached, and uh, Mills and I parted company, not entirely happily. And but I was glad to stop being in academia. I'd done it for 12 years. Enough. All right, enough.
Hmm.
I was definitely not on tenure track. Definitely not tenure. And so I just rebelled against it, as did all my friends in the faculty. We were artist people. We just want to be tied down. I was also on Jerry Brown. Jerry Brown loved the Sufi choir, and me and Gary Snyder and Peter Coyote and Ruth Asawa, he appointed to his, among others, to his arts council. I spent 3 years in politics, 1 year under Reagan, God forbid, and I mean that was so not art. It was just opera buffs, which is a different subject, and I mean just rich people who were supporting opera. That was the point,
Hmm.
and and such institutions. But we wanted to make. Jerry Brown said, "Let's make this arts council. Let's put artists on the arts council." And so
Imagine that.
we did, and we tried to do really good work. After 3 years of that, I had to say, "This is not politics. Is not art," and it ate my life. I I get a stack of grants that I'd have to read in a month and give away money. It was a big responsibility. What life was there for me, So it's really a service job, a duty job. But I loved Jerry Brown, and he loved his arts council, and he loved the choir, and everybody got along, and we did what we could, and lasted as long as we could last. And then other people came in, um, and I felt the same way about academia too. I just enough. It's very good. I did. I taught a lot of people. I learned a lot.
Hmm.
um, Enough. So I was really happy to. Uh, for me, it was a cash cow because I needed students, and suddenly I'm conducting 35, 40 people every week, and guess what? I got students, and one idea was I'm going to teach you guys how to write music. And I'm going to take your songs and arrange them and make them beautiful, and then teach you how to do it. And I had Randall Collin in there, and Marcy Tellis, and Carol Frick, and anyway, others. There's quite a list of people who were gifted, and Doug Bose, who was a protege of mine, and then turned out to conduct that choir for the next 15 years, with great skill, and so it was very good for me. And at the same time, I was in a spiritual community, but this community was different. This
Hmm.
wasn't about Allah and Ram and spiritual practice. This was a choir about singing together as members of a community where we wanted to feel our communality,
Hmm.
and as people who lived in the county and who thrived here.
Hmm.
So it's from Santa Rosa all the way to the coast, and that was the provenance of the choir, and it was just so. Uh, there was a lot of energy, a lot of rising energy, and within a couple of years, like we're selling out our concerts, and people were stomping and clapping, and I was I had a good time. Randall and me split the piano playing jobs, and you know, and we did some classical music, not with great success, but we did what we could. But
Hmm.
mostly it was the stuff that we had produced, or that I had arranged, or that somehow it had come through us.
Hmm.
And I think the first year or the second year, I said, we're, on our spring concert, we're doing everything. It's all original music. And we invented a theme, which they do every year. This one is called Music from Home, and it was about the county. And it was an ecstatic experience. Everybody was glowing about it, you know. So and that went on. I went on for 8 years, and then I had to duck out because it was, you know, eat your life. But
Mhm.
you know, that's it was I really liked it, and Doug took over, so it was in good hands. So that's good. I just really, really, really liked it. It gave me a sense of community that I've never had living anywhere, and it's stayed with me. I know where I live now, and I know who
Yeah.
lives here, even though there's cardiologists up in the hills. But you know, we're a very mixed breed,
Yeah.
you know, and you know, there's 100 cows across the street. You know, a guy whose legacy to the original Spanish grant is the heir, and he runs the thing. And the Shire Ranch is next door. That's another story. And I mean, I live in a community,
Yeah.
and that's precious.
Hmm.
So that's what I got from that choir. You know, to my own sense of community, and that I was of benefit to it, could help it out, and now there's a legacy of it, which is taken on the colors of the people who are doing it.
Hmm.
And then I'm the forgotten grandfather. Yay. I like to go in there and do something and disappear. That's my idea of heaven. Now every year I go back, or I have been going back, and their spring concert, they always play a song by Marcy Tellis and Gordon Stubby named "Music from Home." And it's a really beautiful song. They sing it every year. And Gordon sits over here and I sit over here. We do two piano accompaniment, and they sing it and sing it. Everybody stands up and sings it. Everybody, it's great.
Well,
People die though. I have to point that out. People
yeah.
do die. Everybody falls off to the left.
Um, Before we wrap up, you're working on a memoir. Students, are you composing and
Oh
recording?
yeah, I have never stopped composing since I was 13 years old.
Yeah.
It just keeps coming out. I wrote some pedagogical pieces over the last 20 years called 24 Almost Easy Pieces. And I wrote 24 more, 24 really not all that difficult pieces. I don't know what I'm going to call it.
Yeah.
Well, that's 48 pieces. That's a lot of pieces.
Yeah.
And I did that. I started actually writing. I've been researching my book for 2 years, 3 years, but I started actually writing in September no, I guess it was, yeah, I started actually writing. I outlined it. Started actually writing in September. So from September till now, which is a bunch, I wrote those 24 pieces plus a couple other things. I just like, and I have a lot of records that I have yet to. They're sort of circling the airport, waiting to land because of the pandemic. I couldn't get together with my engineer, and
Yeah.
Joe Hoffman died. That's a sad thing. He was engineer up in Occidental, who I worked with for 40 years,
Wow.
and so you know, those things are just hanging over my head. But I have to finish this book first, so I'm very, very. I'm not without projects, you know.
Sounds
And
like it.
then these pieces all have to be published, and I have somebody who does all that work for me. But it's a long process. You write a piece, and it might take 5 days to write a short piece, or a month to write a longer piece, and then it takes years to get it perfect, to get it published in Finale, to get it out there in my website and available, or to seek a publisher if it's a book, or to have a publisher and write a book.
Yeah.
However that works, the process is just endless. So the actual creative time is short,
Yeah.
you know, and the realization time is very, very long. So that's the artist's grief,
Hmm.
you know. Woe is me, because it takes 10 seconds to write it and 10 years to have it produced and out there so you can forget about it. And you know that's definitely my story now, because
Hmm.
things have sort of piled up. So I have 6 recordings that are in various stages of that are recorded in various stages of release.
Hmm.
including a collation of all the Sufi Choir rounds and prayers that I did over 50 years. And anyway, I won't list them, but I have an improvisational trio called The Bloom, and we have actually two things waiting
Mhm.
that are recorded. And I want to do another improv record. I just did one. Hey, go to my website and buy Transparencies. You won't be disappointed. It's called Transparencies. If you missed that, it's called Transparency.
And what is your website?
Oh, I forget. No, it's Cold Mountain Music. That's one thing. Cold Mountain Music at uh, coldmountainmusic.com. Duh. As I see, the email has changed. Coldmountainmusic.com. That's what it is. And everything will be processed in due time.
Mhm.
But anyway, that's me. Um, I could happily play now.
Yeah, please feel free to play us.
I'll play us out.
Yeah,
Okay. Bye, Dan.
by alluding.
Thanks. This is nice.
Thank you so much.
Feels very comfortable.